fantastic, whatever day you're watching this, I am mulling over data. Imagine that. There's the data log that I'm looking at. Give you guys an idea for what I am ponderizing. Still looking at fuel quality primarily because, well, I got nothing better to do with the car right now. And to stay on top of how fuel quality is working is pretty important because it gives you a pretty solid idea as far as, you know, knock sensitivity, things like that. That's the big thing that I've been actually fighting. Well, at least that's one of the things I was dealing with. But the fact of the matter is that it's just so much hotter now than what it was then. I mean, it's what, the beginning of December 4th. Michael Grove's in. What's up, man? Chase is in saying howdy. Hello, hey. But the thing about it is those issues typically only come up when the air charges are really, really low and, meaning density altitude. Michael Corleone is in with the arm flex. I like it. So what I'm looking at is just basically, okay, well, is the fuel still at least somewhat consistent even at the elevated temperatures that we're working with? And, well, yeah, nothing new to report. Only funny thing about this is just how low, or how varied, I should say, that the air charge is. And this is, again, you start getting into boosted versus NA and all that other kind of stuff. The boosted stuff is always going to be more sensitive, but it's still important to do this if you've got naturally aspirated combinations that you're really trying to eke out everything that you can. Although it kind of would confound me as to why you would get super aggressive with timing with these Hemis. I mean, I know that we tried every trick in the book with the 392 to just eke more power out of it. And for whatever reason, above what is indicated in the software, above about 17 degrees of timing, which actually kind of translates, I believe that there's like 10 degrees of base timing factored in, at least with the NA cars. And you would find that around that 17 degree mark, going much higher than that really didn't matter. And it really didn't matter what fuel we were running. Stock cam, it just didn't care. And even with the aftermarket stuff and the custom grind stuff we were doing in-house, the timing suite just, it didn't really generate any extra power. And so, you'd kind of just get into the mode of set it and forget it. And it didn't really matter if it was the older 392s, the newer 392s, the new operating system with the different cam mapping. It really didn't matter. You could try to throw all the timing in the world at it, rock the cam back, and the car just would typically lose power at that point. So, and obviously with the aftermarket stuff, with the, custom grind, you just install the cam straight up and send it. So I guess the point that I'm getting to is that, when I'm going through all this data and I'm constantly data logging, constantly trying to get an idea so that, of what the fuel quality is going to act like with the temperature. The funny thing about it right now is it's the beginning of December. We've got, what is it, like 80 degrees today or something stupid and crazy humid. It was so humid that everything basically was wet. And so little wonder why I've got such low air charge values. I mean, number one, it's hot, but even with that, you would typically see air charge values go up with higher humidity, but it's so warm that even with the higher humidity, they're only cresting, to give you an idea, for you Hellcat owners out there, 1.37, 1.38 grams per second, which for December, I should be in like the 145 range, 147 range. So that is a significant amount of a difference in total air charge coming into the engine. So if you guys are suffering through that along with me, then cheers. But mainly just playing around with the car, playing around with transmission tune settings, things like that. That's been the big thing that I've been doing with the car. trying to make sure that the car's been great. And I'm trying to make sure that everything's good with just drivability. And with these 8 speeds, you can get extremely spoiled with the awesome drivability you can drag out of these things. And so if something is infinitely adjustable, that means it's always out of adjustment, right? So I have been obsessing over my 7 to 8 shift at very light partial throttle. I've got this thing where I really like for the car to shift, and I mean, this is at super light throttle. I like it to carry 7th gear to about 72, 73 miles an hour, up to about 75. Somewhere in that window is where I like it to shift into 8th. Now you can roll out of the throttle and it'll hang on to 8th gear as far down as you like, but just the normal driving, kind of just easing into the throttle, that's what I like. And of course, if you're accelerating any harder, then it's going to carry the gears the way you normally expect it to, just based on throttle position. But it's that's really what I've been working on the most, is just getting that the infinitesimal little details sorted out with the car. And you find really that that's where the fun is in the tuning. Tuning for maximum power is really easy to do. That's absolutely not that difficult. The toughest part is just getting that transmission tune sorted out to where it's just right. And the thing about it is that it's so subjective. There's not any like right or wrong way to shift out of 2nd into 3rd under partial throttle. If you're the type of guy that likes rapid gear succession, that's your thing. If you're the type of guy that likes the gears to hang on seemingly forever, well, that's your thing too. And that's really where, having the software and having the ability to just change shift scheduling is plenty enough to keep somebody occupied for a long, long time. And it has nothing to do with putting yourself in a scenario where you're going to get yourself in trouble. Okay. I mean, basically the stuff that I'm adjusting right now is at throttle inputs that would be, it's hardly even overriding in a parade, right? I mean, it's just hardly any throttle input, but it's that slight throttle input. We're talking less than 40%. And by the way, the percentages get a little bit screwed up when you start talking about, driver command torque and things like that. But we're talking just like the first ½ inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch of throttle input. That's what makes the car feel lively. That's what makes the car fun. And if you can get the car to carry the power out, have a little bit more of an extended driver command torque, the car is going to be a little bit more fun to drive. And so one of the things that I really liked about the Demon and the Red Eye is when they have a 309 gear, they've got an aggressive driver command torque table, and they've got a little bit more aggressive shift scheduling. And so what I did is I was looking at the tables and I was remembering driving the Demon and the Red Eyes and all those cars. And I really like driving those cars a lot. And I was thinking, well, now that I've done all this wide open throttle tuning with the car, and it's basically done at this point, until it's not done, right? But you get the picture, right? They're never done. But what I wanted to do is just really drill down into the drivability part of the tune. And so that's really what I've been working on. And it's kind of funny when you're like literally playing with these itty bitty tiny throttle inputs. It gets so frustrating because get all your tuning done, get everything up to temperature, take it for a drive. And I mean, you start to obsess over just a couple of miles per hour. You start to obsess over, does it shift into 8th at 74 miles an hour? Or does it shift into 8th at 76? Or is it 75? Or is it 77? And it's funny the difference, like the way your brain will actually adjust itself to this arbitrary number that is literally like the most subjective part of driving the car, right? But it's weird how that 1 mile an hour seems to take forever to get to. It's like, okay, I'm at 74. Is it going to shift at 75? Is it going to shift at 75? And you're waiting on this like 1 mile an hour difference. You're just trying to just completely drill down into this tune and get it to do exactly what you want it to do. And so that's what I was able to do over the course of a few days of just toying with it, because you know, it's easy to start obsessing over this stuff, but I got this thing to where it is just about perfect. Like under the throttle input that I'm looking for it to shift, it's like right at 74, 75, it'll click into 8th gear, and it's like, yes, that's exactly what I wanted. So anyway, you know, you've got guys that are all interested in horsepower. I want the fastest damn thing on a 4-wheel rubber tire, dang, and it's like, dude, I'm so far past that. I am nth degreeing a 7 to 8th shift with a partial throttle input less than 40%, which is in essence 0. And really it's more like in the 20% range, just obsessing over a 1 or 2 mile an hour difference. It's a completely different level of nerd. That's all I can tell you is where I'm at right now. Chase is in saying, how's everything going? It's going good. Warm saying, checking in. What's up? Dr. Diff is in. What's up, man? Saying, how you been? Good. Good to catch a live chat. What's the topic tonight? Just general chat, really. Nothing too crazy. Gary's in saying, hello, everyone. What's up, Gary? No, I'm mainly talking about what I'm doing with the car right now, just kind of goofing off a little bit with the trans tune, having a little bit of fun with the car, really more than anything else. And this is the part where the tuning side of it becomes fun again. You know, when I was obsessing over just getting the last bit of power out of the thing with 93 octane, you got to remember, guys, we kind of already played that game. And you know, a 1012 at 137 or whatever was indicated, 138 indicated on the board, but I think it was measuring exit speed. I want to say that number was probably more like, without having data logged it, unfortunately, but without having data logged that pass, I would say it was probably more like 135, 136. There's not a whole lot left to do with it on 93 octane. I could throw a race gas tune in it. You know, all a race gas tune does at this point in time is make the car slower than if I put together an E85 tune. E85 tune would require different fuel pumps, different injectors, and just things that I'm not really willing to do to the car. And I'm just having too much fun with it on good old-fashioned pump gasoline. Although it is a little bit enlightening for me to get out there and figure out and find what gas stations actually do have halfway decent fuel. And the last run of Buc-ee's wasn't all that great, but this tank of Exxon seems to be pretty much rocking. So, you know, Shell would probably do the same thing. And Chase is saying, name a car for a build. I'm going to build it in Forza Horizon 4. First thing that came into mind was actually a 240, but let's see, only because I've got a soft spot for 240s. By the way, I'm still kicking myself in the ass. There was a maybe a mid-90s Toyota pickup truck for sale out here, V6 automatic. Clean, looked like it just rolled off the showroom floor. I should have snagged it up. I didn't think anybody was going to mess with it. I was going to go look at it this past week, and it was gone. So, meh. But I really wanted to pick that thing up. I mean, it was showroom clean. Anyway, see, Dr. saying, can we touch a little bit also in tuning is that more data to your tuner, the better. Send data to your tuner when you're remote tuning. Nice to see your Hellcat gone this far, especially with tuning. You say you have a good luck with Raceway. Never really messed with Raceway, but yeah, Exxon, the nearest Exxon to me has been really good. And with the new fuel pump in the car, life's good. I mean, injector duty cycle is low. I mean, even at high load conditions, just kind of an FYI, I mean, this thing is real happy. I've got injector duty cycle of 87%, fuel pump duty cycle 85, so it's not even maxed out yet at 86 and change. Fuel pressure steady at 80. So, yeah, she's a happy little one since the new fuel pump went in. Thought Chris's car was actually going to pop. His was so bad. 2 fuel pumps in basically within the span of 2 weeks. But yeah, so talking about data. So how much data do you need? Well, I can go down the list of everything that I go with, but for you guys that are trying to mess with remote tuning can be real stressful, especially if you're the guy on the other end of your live feed. If you're doing a live tuning session, if you've got, it's such a time consuming process. But if you're doing back and forth with email tuning, that is a train wreck. So things that you absolutely need to have, I mean, each tuner is going to be a little bit different, but you absolutely need to have your throttle torque source number one in line. That's going to be kind of a tattletale. Fast path and slow path indicators are going to have to be in there as well. One of the weirder things that I've found is that's the throttle torque source is the first thing that I'm looking at. If something's acting weird, it'll tell you, like for example, fast path is going to let you know if there's something happening to the tune, that's exactly what's going to happen. So in this case, on this shift here, I'll pull this up right here. It just says, hey, look, we're making a change. Something's going on. It's just external trans torque management. But those are some things that are really important when you're data logging that your tuner is going to need. Now, in a lot of cases, your tuner will put together a config file for you. And the config file is just it's going to be a configuration of what you're going to be sending them, with the assumption that, like I say, on my end, I'm really more in terms of messing with tunes and helping guys out. I've done more. I say only. In some cases, I will do tune validations for guys, and those will be emails. Those won't be live. But I have done several different cars live, and it's typically when that car is at a track somewhere where I'm not, but I've got to get in and make changes. That's just, Team Viewer 13, I get in there, take over their computer and just make all the changes there and then send them on their way while they're there. So, but yeah, the more information, the better. In fact, but it's having the right information that makes all the difference in the world. And making sure that whoever is doing the driving, it's kind of funny, making sure whoever's doing the driving can drive the dang car. I've seen guys using the throttle as a light switch. It's just been kind of weird. So anyway, there's a lot that comes with it. Make sure you're doing it in a safe environment. That's going to be key. But to give you guys an idea, just in terms of, how the car is doing with load and everything else, this will be at an elevated load condition. Let me show you what the knock sensor voltage looks like way out here. So as you can see, I mean, it's nice and low. That fuel quality is really good. And that's obviously at 5,200 RPM. It's a high load, high RPM, but not max RPM number. And it's really not commanding a lot of timing, but more than what you would see in really low air density situations. And you're looking at 0.45 and 0.77. And this is, again, in an extremely high load condition. Very high wind resistance condition. But you've got to do that. I mean, I've got to load these things up to be able to, luckily we're, again, we're in Velocito. So Velocita. And, obviously, long flight back. But the fact of the matter is that if you don't load these things up, you can't really get a solid data set. It's why dyno tuning is so important. Street tuning is one thing, dyno tuning is going to be a little bit different, but why it is so important that if you don't have access to, Velocito, Mexico, or you don't have access to a loaded dyno, getting this type of data is incredibly difficult. A lot of guys don't like the idea of getting their car out in the middle of nowhere and loading it this hard, but the reality is that if you're not loading it like this, you're not going to get reliable data. You're not going to be able to find out what knock threshold the fuel is that you're running. And you don't want to have a situation come up where you get the car, go out and you're playing around in it and you end up hurting something, and you're hurting it because, fueling wasn't quite where it should be. So anyway, just again, some things to consider when you're going back and forth with your tuner on these tunes. Tuning for power is easy. Transmission tuning, you almost just want to train somebody how to do it. Like, just say, look, here's all you have to look at is shift scheduling. Here's how you adjust shift scheduling, and then turn them loose. Like, congratulations, you're a tuner now. You're a veteran. Go out there and go knock this out. And then really that's what you almost have to do when it comes to trans tuning. So you catch up with you guys. Oh, he's Doc Div saying he usually sends out the config file. Find requested torque management versus flywheel torque is good. Yeah. I know what my tables are doing. And so when I, just the max and min, just because I've kind of dorked out on looking at those tables. So I know what my command torque reduction is. And really, as long as I'm seeing it dump spark, I'm happy with that. I do look at commanded torque versus, or expected torque versus actual. Let's see, I'll pull that up for you guys here. I keep that kind of in the background. Eerily enough, for you guys that are playing around, especially with the stock boost guys, where the hell is it? This is my own config file, and I'm looking for it. Yeah, this is fine. Here we go. So to give you an idea, this is stretching it out. Actual torque versus expected torque right here. And you can see it's coming up right before I'm commanding the torque management. So we're at 578, and through the shift, it's yanking it down to 389. So that's what that timing drop is doing, per the computer's mind anyway. It's going from 578 foot-pounds of torque down to 342, 389, and then immediately ramping it back up to 621. Funny though, actual torque at 621, the stock expected torque table wasn't much higher than that, if at all. So again, I mean, the car is making really good power, and I've had to make sure that I've gone in and made some changes to some tables to make this thing not go into some kind of funky limp mode or something like that. But again, it's the little bitty, stupid, dumb changes that you end up making all the difference in the world. And again, it's the reason why I've been able to run a 1012 at the numbers that I've been able to run on pump gasoline with this thing. And, you know, obviously nobody else has been able to do that. And it's not because I've done anything all that great. It's not. It's just really sweating the details and having so many data logs on this car. This is no joke. I went through and I deleted it's up, like it was 80. I deleted like another 35 or 40 files, just data logs. It's like just a bunch of just stuff that I had that was eating up. It was just kind of cluttering things up. So I've deleted about 120 data logs on this car, and I still have a ton left. And it's like, how many? This has got to be the most documented or data logged Hellcat ever to exist. I mean, that's a little bit of a joke, but I mean, it's got to be in the top 10. Dr. Diff, hey, thanks, man. Saying closer to those numbers, the better drivability is too. Yeah, I mean, like I say, I've had a lot of fun just playing with the car lately. You know, it's one thing when these things turn into, it's a little bit of a job, but thank you for the contribution, bro. I appreciate it. You know how it is. I mean, it's one thing when you start obsessing over your own stuff, and it's like, okay, I've got to be able to cover this number and this DA, and if I can do this, then it'll do that, and you know. So, so it gets a little bit annoying, you know, when you drive the thing and it's like, man, I need to adjust that. But then you forget about it because there's so many other more important things to adjust and to look at and try to drill down into. And so what I've been able to do lately is just, again, be able to play with the car. It's back on the street setup. She is getting, I did break down, and so there's been one thing that's annoyed me about my car for a while, and I'm going to make a change to it. There's actually two things. But the first thing is the one thing that I'm going to change the color of the brake calipers at some point. They're just going to be flat black. I'm not even going to try to worry about a Brembo sticker on them or anything like that. The red calipers over time will fade a little bit, and mine are faded just enough to where if I think about it and I notice it, it annoys me. And so what I will probably do is just change the color to flat black and leave it alone. The other thing that I'm thinking about doing, well, it's not thinking about doing, it's something that's going to be done, is I am changing the rear spoiler on that car. I have been in love with that performance spoiler for, well, ever since I saw it on a car, and was able to hook up with my buddy Ernesto, friend of the channel, and he got me a smoking deal on one. So I am going to be putting that spoiler on the car, hopefully this coming week. So very much looking forward to that. Along with that spoiler comes a new camera, which the car desperately needs, because that old factory camera from 2015, it looks like I'm filming anything happening in reverse with a freaking tomato, man. It is awful. So, you know, I'm going to be looking at, real excited to get the new camera on the back of the car, but I'll be stoked to get that performance spoiler on the back of it. If you guys aren't familiar with what it looks like, it's a little bit longer. It doesn't come up as high. It's not as duck-billed, not as wedge-shaped. I never thought that spoiler really fit the car just right. And the thing that I like about the performance spoiler is that it comes out a little bit more. It's a little bit flatter, and it's got a little bit of a drop, just a little bit of a drop around the sides, which I think really complements the car quite a bit. Just there's something about that just triangle looking wedge on the back of the car that, I don't know, it almost looked forced. In fact, if I'm being honest, would prefer not over the performance spoiler, but over the factory spoiler. I'd rather have like an RT spoiler from like an 08 or an 09, that little bitty, this little subtle look to it. But I just scrolling through here, I saw Mr. Dar saying, changed my spoiler day one when I got my cat. You will love it. Had mine done in body color. Very nice. I'm going to keep it black. In fact, that's the other thing. So I'm going to keep the spoiler black, and because it's red, the car's red, and it's just a whole lot of red right now. I'm also waiting on Direct Connection to come out with whatever strobe livery that they'll have for those cars. And if they've got something that I think that they should have, but if they've got some cool looking strobe type livery, I will be putting that on the car also. Mainly because it'll just break the car up a little bit, kind of give it a little bit of a visual pop. Like I say, she's got a lot of red, and I love the way that it looks, but I'm just looking for a little bit of a different look, a little bit of a different kind of take on it, and something that's traditional. So that's really what I'm looking for. But I'm glad you like it. I'm glad it sounds like you like yours, and I'm really looking forward to getting it. Aaron's asking, which car is this? It's a 2015 Hellcat Challenger. Dr. Dude saying, Aaron, this is a Hellcat Revlon. She's a beast. That's right. Aaron's asking, also, is it a non-red eye? Actually, it is an early release 2015. So her birthday is actually in 2014. That's how old that car is. Oh, Dr. Div saying his Pop's car's got a new spoiler. Very nice. Gonna get that camera working. Yeah, I need to get mine. I'm just so looking forward to getting installed. I need to get, and I had one. I swear to you, it's like I put it down somewhere. I have no idea where it went. But it's so to do it right, you need some Goo Gone, a plastic, like a scraper, like just a wide plastic scraper. The two-sided tape that's on these things is pretty intense, and so and I am going with by the way, I am going with the Mopar part. I don't know if I clarified that. I know there's some aftermarket companies that are out there. I'm sure that their stuff is good, but I'm going to stay with the idea that my car is going to be a parts bin car. In essence, my car is basically Direct Connection before Direct Connection was Direct Connection for the modern era. So, the rear end came, right from Dodge. It's a parts bin part number. The rear seat delete, Mopar, parts bin, rear seat delete. That's kind of the direction we're looking at right now. But the only thing that's not out of the Mopar catalog are the idler pulleys, which I replaced on that car because I hated the way the stock ones looked. It looked like something you just dredged out of a ditch, and the diff brace, which does something. I don't know. But I like having it back there. So there's that. So, that's what's upcoming for Little Miss Revlon, aka Chandelier. She's doing good. It'd be kind of nice to get a little bit cooler, crisper weather. I think we're supposed to have a weather change here pretty quickly, just to try to get a little bit more data on the car. But and like I say, as it sits now, it's working out pretty nice. I can tell you, if the question is, well, what about the tires, and what am I going to do about that? I'm just going to keep those Nitto Tri-5Rs until they're bald. At one point, I was going to pull them off the car and sell them, but at this stage of the game, I've been kind of running them pretty hard, and they're pretty good for data acquisition. I mean, from a soft roll, they'll actually hook up from about 45 miles an hour on. So, I mean, there's that. And, if I'm just kind of going through the gears, first gear, second gear, third gear, and then I whack the throttle real quick, it will absolutely light those things up like nothing. As a matter of fact, I did that today, just playing around with a car. First gear, second gear, third gear, and just kind of go, yeah, and just roll into the throttle, and it does some fun things. But, I can say that they hook well enough to where I can get reliable, repeatable data on concrete, which is about as good of a report as I can get. I mean, in other words, it's as high a praise as I can give a tire for that car. I can tell you, though, that if that car has any more power than what it has, those tires would start to get frustrating. I will definitely say that. In other words, if the car had even the new 7% lower pulley, that would be a bit frustrating. So, Aaron's asking, methanol anytime? Not at all. Not a fan of methanol, to be honest with you, because the way that the methanol is distributed in the Hellcat it's a big ask. Let me put it like this. It's a lot to ask when it comes to distribution, because what you have to remember is you have a supercharger. Let me draw this out for you real quick. You've got a supercharger, and you have to think of this as though the cover isn't on the car. So whenever you spray methanol into one of these things, aside from the mess that it makes, you've got it. It looks like tits. What's funny? Anyway, this is, I didn't mean for this, but this would be say this is just the discharge side of it, okay? The lid's off, and we're just going to say that the bricks are over here, okay? So when you introduce, let's say this is your snout, you're introducing methanol in through here, goes through the rotors, which would be underneath this, and now it's coming out of here, okay? It's coming out of there under pressure, and that's what you would expect. I mean, the sky's blue. Okay, I understand that. But when it comes out of there, it's not like it's being distributed evenly to every cylinder. You'll have some cylinders that get hit with it pretty hard. You'll get other cylinders that don't even see it. And the problem is your initial intuition is that these cylinders would hit it the hardest, and these cylinders maybe wouldn't see any of that methanol. It's not always the case. In fact, it's a dynamic condition, and as RPM goes up, as flow goes up, the dynamics of the flow will change, and so you'll have number 8 getting a lot, then number 8 doesn't have any. Number 6 now has a lot. It's just a weird dynamic when you start getting into the dynamics of distribution in that supercharger. And I don't like the idea of trying to rely on it to pick up power, especially if you're trying to tune for methanol injection. I have seen the horror stories of guys that had tuned vehicles for a meth injection and had the following take place. This is just stuff that happened like in my field of vision. Meth pump go bad, meth hose pop off, a distribution issue create a problem with hydrolock because of too large of a jet being used with not enough airflow. oil contamination, like heavy oil contamination because of oversaturation on one cylinder. There's a lot of weird things that come with methanol injection that are not as, let's just say there's no real romance. The romance is gone once the reality of this stuff starts kicking in, with one major exception, and that is if you are running direct port methanol injection. In that case, the stuff is amazing, and you can at that point tune for the methanol injection. I can literally give you the history of water meth injection. This computer's basically about to die, so I got to go ahead and kill it. But one of the things about methanol injection is if you don't get the distribution right, I guess what I should say, the major takeaway from methanol injection is if you don't get the distribution right, the drawbacks outweigh the benefits. And if you're only using the methanol for insurance, then you're not taking full advantage of the methanol. If you're tuning to the methanol and you are not using a direct port system, then you run the risk of over-timing the engine in some cylinders and being dead on, if, for example, in other cylinders because of distribution issues. Again, look, some folks will argue with me on that. I completely accept that argument because, like, when you work in a shop, you see everything that goes wrong. It's kind of like being a doctor in a way. You know, you never see healthy people. Healthy people don't go to the doctor typically. It's people that are sick. So as far as you're concerned, the entire world is sick. Well, when you work at a shop, the same thing applies. And everything breaks, everything's broken, everything's kind of a piece of crap. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, you only see the problems, and when people have problems, they bring the car to the shop and you go, oh, that's what you were doing wrong. You'd be surprised some of the things that show up. It blow your mind. But anyway, hopefully that answers the question. Dad's Garage, hey man, thank you very much. Saying new Scat finished being built on Thursday. Got a train headed this way yesterday. Should see it in 2 to 3 weeks. Very nice. Congratulations. Dad's Garage has got him a new Scatty. Very sweet. It is en route. G-Man saying just traded his 14 SR8 Challenger with the Diablo 91 octane. The fans seem to be running more often and somewhat staying on. Any advice for modifying the temp for fans, low, medium, high? Yeah, low 192, medium 194, high 196. That'll keep them from running on the freeway. What you're probably running into, and this, by the way, if you've got one of these newer Mopars, is one of the biggest mind F's that you'll find yourself in. And it basically goes like this. And I literally, this computer just keeled over. But one of the issues is you have the fans are pulse width modulated, which is just to say that they don't work off of an if-then switch. Basically that thermostat gets to 194 and they kick on. Thermostat gets to 196, they kick on higher. It doesn't quite work like that, but it does, but it doesn't. But basically you've got a pivot number. And if you try to set, this is the funny thing, if you try to set that pivot number even 1 degree lower than 189 degrees, those fans and the Hellcats and the modern stuff will just run forever. It's like they never shut off. Even when temperature is in fact lower, it's within a range. It's within this gray area that's right outside of that range. So if you think of it like this. If you're looking at 190 degrees as your pivot number, the fans could kick on at 189 or they could kick on at 191. And when they kick on, they can kick on low, and they're going to ease voltage into the fans because it's not it goes from 5 volts to, 7 volts to 12 volts, low, medium, high. It doesn't work like that. It just kind of blends the Anyway, it sounds like a really trick system. The only problem is that it works a little bit counterintuitive to what you think. And it is that when the temperature reaches that number, that is when the fans kick on high. It doesn't stay high forever. When the fan temperature drops below your predetermined number, then it goes to medium. So it's not like it just goes blasting on high until it gets back down to your pivot number. It blasts on high until it gets down below the number, and has to be below the number. No, it has to reach the number, then it will slow down, and then it slows down again, and then it slows down to 0, which in this case would be 10.4% pulse width modulation is 0. So anyway, set them to that. You'll be fine. It'll work great in traffic, and the fans won't be coming on all the time. Ask me how I found out about that. So one of the funny things is that I have played with fan settings. I've messed with the pulse width modulation stuff. I've messed with the hysteresis side, which is just to say the window, that foggy area. I've messed with everything you can think of to mess with fans. And this is what I found out. The fans basically just work off of one table, set the tables all to the same thing, and let it do its thing. But you have to data log it. One of the things that I actually look at is fan pulse width. And the reason why I do that is because when I was initially going through all the fan settings and messing with everything that could possibly be fan setting related, I was trying to get the fans as low onto as low of a number as I could get them to without having them come on at cruise. I jacked with that for what felt like forever. I mean, I would put settings in there that I thought it would be perfectly fine and the fans would still kick on. And so I would have the fans on low just cruising down the highway. That's not what you want. That's how you fry a fan. So here we go with this. And I'd start messing with it and drive it, messing with it, drive it, mess with another thing and drive it. Basically, I had part of those data logs that I deleted, they were all fan related. It was me messing with fans to the point. I probably had 12 different data logs just based around fans. But again, that's how you get this stuff figured out. And I don't know, I swear every car is a little bit different because I know for a fact that one of the fan settings I put into my car, another car seems to love. And my car is like, nah, we're just going to run the fans all the time. I like that. So background stuff going on. William's asking, can you put a 2400 stall speed converter in a stock 5.7 Hemi without changing your cam? Sure you can. Yeah, you can put whatever size converter you want in the car without changing your cam. Don't worry about that. But it'll come out of the hole a little bit harder, but it might be a little bit lazier. But 2400 is pretty easy to work with. So I think that'd be fine. Aaron said, yeah, you've made me think of equilibrium or harmonics. Now you've got direct port. Yes, sir. Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, Aaron, the big issue is there's a lot of things that are marketed in the aftermarket that in theory work, and they're designed to work based on the in theory that we're talking about here. And right now we're talking about methanol injection. The way that it'll be marketed is it lowers charge temperatures, it adds octane, it does all these great things, but it's impossible to be able to predict. Well, it's not for the average guy, it's impossible to be able to predict how that distribution is really going to affect how that car is running. Is it really removing any heat? I mean, yes and no. Yes, it is, but no, it's not really all that relevant in the grand scheme of things. It can potentially create more problems than it's worth. Now, if it's installed the way that the original people that used water, it's MW systems is what they were called back in the 20s and 30s. MW systems were there specifically when they were first developed. They were all literally direct port injected. And they were direct port injected because of the issues that they ran into with distribution. It's not something that you can really mess with when the longevity of the engine and the fact that you're trying to get to keep the thing running and keep it in one piece at full power for extended periods of time. That's when methanol water injection works. But the other thing too is some people try to use like windshield washer fluid, or they'll pour like isopropyl alcohol into it and all this other. It's like, stick with what you're working with. Don't use anything that's outside of the range of what your manufacturers suggest if you're going to plan on going that route. Oh, and by the way, anybody that puts methanol injection on a gas car, like gas naturally aspirated, you've been sold a bill of goods that is probably less than ideal for your application. Rift is in. What's up, man? Chris is asking, put a 285 pulley on the kitty, saying when the throttle is applied to get a puff of smoke out of the exhaust, is probably just because it's going rich. As if it's like black smoke or dark colored smoke, that's just the car going rich on initial tip in, which is fine. A lot of tuners will do that. They'll have power enrichment. Their air fuel ratio will be pretty rich, and on that initial, once you go into what is in essence wide open throttle, what it would recognize as wide open throttle, it's gonna start hitting that engine with a ton of fuel. So if you see a puff of black smoke, that's super common. Stock cars sometimes do that. Dr. Div's hanging out with Rift. Mean Cat saying, what up, B? Checking in. Good show. What up, homie? Rob's in. Nasty little 285 pulley car right there. So one of the issues, we're talking about water meth injection or methanol injection. I'll give you guys like story time real quick. You wonder like, well, what could possibly go wrong? Okay, well, let me tell you the things that did go wrong. So I mentioned the one thing about the pump. That really wasn't that big of a deal. That in that particular situation, when the pump failed for the water meth kit that was on the car wasn't being tuned to run specifically on water meth injection. It was more or less hooked up to the car as what the person thought of was an insurance thing, and it okay. But that pump, it failed on the dyno. And so you go to wide open throttle and you wouldn't see any change in fueling in the cars. Like, yeah, the water meth's just not firing because it's adding octane, meaning that it's adding fuel. So, got a new pump, put it on the car. Guy brought it back. It just did what they normally do, which is kind of make a mess anyway. And there you go. A lot of the ways that those work, by the way, you don't want it to run. They're progressive. Okay. So Nitrous Outlet made a kit. I apologize for not knowing this part number. At one point in my life, I think I had it rehearsed, but then I also had it kind of flip-flopped. Anyway, the ones that run on injector pulse width, the same way that you would set up a nitrous kit, that would be a progressive nitrous system, where at injector pulse width A, it starts to fire fuel in nitrous. At this one level, and then it creeps it up and increases the shot as injector pulse width increases. That's how you want to set up your water meth injection. And the idea is that you're not running it off of a pressure switch or off of a boost switch. That's not the best way to go about doing it. If anything, if you were to do it that way, you would almost want to, I mean, you can run it off of a hop switch, but the reliability on those things, I mean, it ends up on a long enough time frame, which is not very long, that reliability spectrum goes to zero with Hobb switches. Not a big fan of them. I mean, they're necessary if you got like a triple pump or something like that. I get it, but your whole world, your life revolves around that Hobb switch at that point. Like the entire health of your engine relies around a part that isn't like it's not even a $50 part, and you've got multiple thousands upon thousands of dollars relying on this one little electric part. I don't know. It never did sound like a good idea. Anyway, getting back to it, what I was getting to is you'd almost be better off running it like the way the old turbo fires did, the old Oldsmobile, which came from the factory with water methanol injection, by the way. That's actually from the factory, that car came with it. And it ran that system off of a seal, like it'd be like this Powerade bottle. If this is your water meth in this bottle, it was sealed. You had a line that came in here, that was your boost pressure. It had a one-way valve. And when it went into boost, it would pressurize this, which would then pressurize the contents into the engine. Trivia for you. Anyway, you'd almost be better off replicating that system where the more boost you have, the more it jets in, and that would be your mechanical way to go about doing it, as opposed to a Hobb switch or something like that. In lieu of that, this is a far better way to go about it, because if the system crashes, you just don't get water meth injection, and presumably you're not tuning the thing on meth injection. I'm not saying that people that tune them on methanol are necessarily doing anything wrong. As a matter of fact, one of the Jeeps that we had at the shop was an LS2 with a Maggie that had in the what would have been the back seat area. It was an LS2 with a Maggie lifted, pretty kick-ass Jeep, four-door Jeep, and it had this thing that looked like almost as big as a carry-on, like an accordion case. Y'all are familiar with what that is. Sized tank in the back, and I'll put it to you like this: as pulleyed up as that car was, if that methanol system didn't fire, that motor was going to pop, plain and simple. Anyway, getting back to some of the horror stories. Hang on just a second. Christiane, thank you very much. Appreciate the contribution. Didn't have a question, but thank you for the contribution. Yeah, if you want to see what a really strong 285 car runs like, in my channel you'll see Mean Cat, which is the silver or gray car, making a hit. That's probably one of the strongest 285 cars out there right now. Got a little bit off track there, but anyway, that the injector pulse width way to trigger and then to ramp in the meth is the best way to go about it. But anyway, we had one of them, long story short, good Lord, talking about really taking forever. We had one car on the dyno blow a meth line, and they had the meth kit and everything obviously in the trunk the way you would expect it to be. Really good kit, really good system, injecting everything. I mean, the whole kit was really good, top notch, top dollar. The problem is that the line, there was a coupler in this line, and the coupler was like right where the door is, where the door closes, not to the front, but to the back. It was underneath the car, right in that plane, like right within, a hand's width of where the door closes. That's where that coupler was. Anyway, on the dyno, that thing pops off and is now, because there's no reference to it. It's just, the system is a dummy system. It goes, injector pulse width, pumps on, do your thing. So as the car was at wide open throttle, that line pops. And I was on the other side of the shop, and I'm kind of looking over. It was a really pretty Hellcat that was on the dyno. And, you're looking at about a Brazilian different things going on at the same time. And I saw it literally pop, and it starts spraying the front undercarriage of the car with water meth, boost juice. It's hosing everything down in front of it. I mean, it's just making this huge mess. So I come flying, stop. Well, you chop throttle, kill everything, but you can't kill the car the way that Mopars are. You can't just throw it in neutral and kill them. It doesn't work like that. So the car is running. I'm running around, popping the trunk, trying to figure out whatever I can do. There's nothing at this point. I'm helpless. And so had to wait till everything came to a stop and then start cleaning everything as fast as you can, because it'll eat everything alive. It's another reason why I'm not a huge fan of meth injection, is because it can make a mess of things. And if you don't clean it up, bit of a problem. It has a nasty habit of tearing up aluminum, which again, if you're spraying it right through your entire system, that's another thing. I mean, you're saturating metal with something that is known to be a bit abusive to metal. Probably not the best thing in the world. Dad's saying, think you're going to be sad to see Frostbite go away? Yeah, it's a really pretty color, man. My two favorite colors right now are just of the new colors, Frostbite and Gold Rush, or Gold Dust, rather. Love that. Riff saying, sup, Riff? Let's see. Chris saying, thank you, you're the best. Oh, thank you for hanging out. Appreciate you. Aaron saying, what's your ideal reliable power adder for a Hellcat? 285 pulley, honest to goodness. That is, like, if I were to do anything to my car, it would be one of two things. 285 is the absolute most that I would go, because I will not put my car on E85. I've got range anxiety with that thing. With E85, I know a lot of guys love it. I get it. It works great. Believe me, if you've ever tuned, if you're a tuner, or if you have a car that's ever been tuned on E85, whoever tuned your car loves you, because E85 is it's like the kindest, nicest, sweetest fuel to tune on. You can't hurt the car on E85. Everybody's going to be happy on E85. It's a beautiful thing. But the downside is availability. And of course, your range suffers by about 40%. So there's that. Anyway, I know technically it's 30, but if you've got E85, you're playing with it. So, go figure. But I will say that with a Hellcat, a 285 upper is the absolute most pulley you can put on the car and still have it survive on pump gas. Pure pump gas, no boostane, no Torco, anything else like that. The downside to that is that you're going to be suffering from low timing if that's all you're ever running the car on is 93 octane at wide open throttle. So I like 295 uppers. I've seen that MMX is marketing a 7% lower pulley. along with the balancer. I'm not really going to say I don't like or dislike the Ripatune pulley, but the thing is let's not beat around the bush right now. There's no such thing as a pulley that doesn't require a tune. Despite what you may have been told, unless you are living at obnoxiously high altitudes, like your physical altitude that you live at, like say if you lived in the high desert, which is like 6,000 feet, everybody always defaults to Colorado. You're at 5,000 feet, Colorado or higher. Then technically, kind of, sort of, yes, you could put one of those pulleys on your car because you're at a physical high altitude, which means oxygen is tough to get a hold of relative to sea level. So when you think of it from that perspective, you're just not making as much power because your KPA or your manifold pressure will not be as high as what it would be at sea level. So yeah, you could run that pulley and get away with it. The factory parameters would be able to manage that. But I wouldn't do it because the fueling wouldn't be right. You would be running still very lean mixtures because, for those of you guys that don't know, these cars come from the factory lean as hell, like obnoxiously lean, like lean to the point where you're like, what? Something doesn't look right here. Like really doesn't look right. So anyway, that's a different scenario altogether, but that's really kind of not what we're talking about. You're talking about maximum power, 93 octane, and keep the thing reliable. If you've got a tuner that speaks Mopar fluently and has put together packages that have stood the test of time, pretty much all of them are going to start to cringe once you start talking about any pulley that is 285 or smaller on pump gasoline. Because 93 octane, notice I said 93 octane isn't always seemingly 93 octane. I mean, I've been proving that with my data logs of fuel quality lately. It just isn't the same. No two 93 octanes are the same. And let's say, for example, you have a pulley that is a 285 and you've got fuel from the same Shell station or Exxon station in my case, or Valero or whatever top tier type of fuel, and you've been doing really well with that, you end up having to put some second tier brand of gas in your car. Well, if it ends up turning out the way that the fuel was that I got, you're going to be looking at knock retard numbers of 2.5 degrees. And my knock sensors are aggressive. And I don't mean in a good way. They're aggressive like, we'll take some out when we see something serious. And it was pulling timing. So, I mean, they're within the noise, believe me. It's a safe range, but I would never give those numbers to anybody to run on their car. So yeah, no two 93 octanes are alike. So just know that. And the reason why I'm saying all of that is I err on the side of caution when it comes to these cars. And again, take my car as an example. My car is a 1050 car in bad weather. Like in just, I don't feel like going to the drag strip. I'm hot. You know, I'm making soup over here, that type of a day. My car will run 1050s. If the weather is really good, still a little bit, still a little bit humid, but the air is, cold, like 50s, then the car will run 10 teens, like clockwork, like a negative 500 day, but not maybe the greatest day. It'll definitely run a 10 teen in that weather and 1020s in clean 0 DA. I guess the point is, if you want to go much faster than that, 285 with a little bit of boostane, you know who I'm looking at here, will get you deep into the 9s. But I would not say that that is a combination that I would go beating up on the street, doing really long street pulls and things like that, unless you've got real life 100 octane fuel in it or you've got access to boostane. If you're talking about what's the most you can run on pump gas, I would say just get you a solid tune with your stock boost, and don't try to go after nth degrees in terms of power, because here's the problem that you're going to run into. If, for example, you've got kind of crappy gas and you're really concerned with fuel quality, like if you want to be like, obsessive about it, which I don't suggest you do, let me do that, because that's fixes an OCD thing for me. Anyway, just know that a stock tune on the fuel that I had would be freaking out in terms of knock retard. And that's a stock car, even with fuel added to it at stock timing values. It's gathering up knock retard numbers. That's how kind of on the edge some of this fuel is. So you can only make power based on the available fuel and knock resistance of the fuel that you have. So in knowing all of this, what do I know you can get away with? 295 or 3.0 upper pulley, I know you can get away with. 7% lower, it falls under that realm as well. I've never played with a 7% lower car, but I can tell you that based on the boost numbers, yes, you can make it work. The downside is that you're going to be hemorrhaging timing in that tune. You'll go from, depending on your air charge, like what we were seeing earlier, 132 air charge dragging down like 17 and a half or 18 degrees of timing. Now you're looking at 11 or 12 degrees of timing. Now, these cars are not very timing sensitive, but you start talking about numbers like 5 degrees of timing, yeah, it's going to be noticeable. So, your gain, your net total gain won't be all that great, but there will still be a gain involved. Now the question is that amount of power worth it? Is 40 horsepower worth the money that you're going to throw at it? Oh, darn. And we didn't really go over the different things that you would have to do just to get to that 40 horsepower number, because as we've seen, injector duty cycle is already kind of at a limit, even with the stock car. So, by the way, yes, we are very close to Velocicito. And since we're very close to Velocicito, sometimes you'll hear guys heading out to make hits. Tonight, they're just doing it for fun because the weather, it's not sucking, but the air is very thick, very humid. Anyway, getting back to it. So if you hear cars going by, yes, the shop is very close to that. So when you have that in mind, the fuel quality in mind, and the knowledge of, and the experience, I should say, that comes with far too many data logs than you care to admit, and you're looking at it from that perspective in terms of mods, that's about all I can tell you in terms of, what pulleys I would put on one of these things. Now, you notice I haven't mentioned anything about nitrous oxide yet. Nitrous oxide's a little bit different story here. I would say that some folks will argue with me about this, but I would say that 100 shot of nitrous on a Hellcat is safer than throwing more pulley at the car. And don't immediately go to, well, nitrous is also charge cooling. It doesn't. It doesn't. But if you've got nitrous in the lid and you've got all of that thing going on where you've got the two nitrous bars right above the bricks, if you do something along those lines, I've seen where that has done really well. So, but again, it's a wet kit, but there's some, either way you look at it, it's going to be expensive, and you are still, you're still really pushing the limits of what 93 octane will support. And I know a lot of guys go, yeah, but I know so-and-so with a turbo on an LS that got blah, blah, blah out of there. Hold up. First of all, if that's where the argument ends up taking you with somebody, turbo, cheat code. You're going to make more power with the turbo anyway. Secondly, though, when it comes to 93 octane, it's the load that's involved. These Mopars are heavy. They've got the aerodynamic coefficient of a barn. There's a lot. They have a lot of rolling resistance. Once you get them above about 140 miles an hour, there's a lot going on there that is adding parasitic losses and parasitic drag to the car that takes power to overcome. And it takes power to overcome, and now we're talking about a specific load. It's an induced load based on aerodynamic drag. This starts to sound a lot like aviation stuff. That's because that's where most of my background is from. I'm messing with, engines and stuff. So that, if nothing else, tells me that at this manifold pressure, at this load, with that amount of drag, if you're really out hammering on the car, it's going to be tough for you to really do a lot better than, well, stock plus a solid tune, or at best, at most, 295 upper pulley, but you're going to have to get injectors. And I would argue at this point, some will argue against what I have to say here, but if you're going to put a pulley on the car, there is no arguing this point. I win this argument every time. You have to have injectors, period, 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 period. I will also remind guys that these cars are starting to now collect some years. I recently replaced my fuel pump. Mean Cat just recently replaced Orange Crush's fuel pump, and it's not uncommon at this stage of the game to see fuel pumps starting to check out. Now, luckily, they don't just die. You'll see their performance start to get worse and worse and worse over time. So it might not be the worst idea, if you're planning on putting pulleys on your car, to go ahead and pony up it's a lot of money. I'm just not going to freak you out with this, but you might want to go ahead and put a new fuel pump in it. If that's as far as you're going to take the thing, get a stock fuel pump, but you're going to want as healthy of a fuel system as you can get. And again, because of the data logging that I do, I am, through, again, my experience, able to tell you that even if you put together a system that is known to be safe on the street on 93 octane, all it takes is for your fuel pump to start to weaken to where you start getting into a situation where now you're way outside of what your injector duty cycle limits are. And again, this is where it is imperative that you're working with somebody that speaks fluent Mopar, because there are tuners, and we've seen this, that will take an injector duty cycle upper limit and they'll put that at an obnoxious number. It's kind of like taking a knock sensor voltage number and setting it way high, like 3.5 volts all the way across the board on a car with stock manifolds. You would never do that, but you would also ensure that you'd never have any knock retard, unless it's like super bad, and then it's just telling you that you've jacked your stuff up. Well, another thing that tuners will do is that they will add fuel, but then they'll take and put the injector duty cycle limits, which is to say at certain loads you don't want to see more injector usage at that particular load. Anyway, they'll put those really high. Well, the problem with that is if you set them too high, fuel injector can't keep up with it. And if the fuel pump is failing, injector duty cycle goes beyond that point, fuel pump can't keep up with it. Now you've got a lean condition and the car's just trying to feed it, but it can't. feed the power request, in other words, and it can't. So, you can say, yeah, all I need is a pulley and injectors and a tune, and I'm good to go. I would argue at this stage of the game that we're in, unless that car is really new with low mileage, fuel pump is your next purchase. It's in your future, no doubt about it. And again, Kristen, thank you very much. Hilton's asking, hey, B, if you wanted a 6-speed Scat to be a ride on the street, how would you build it? Depends. What's my budget? And what are we going to be doing with this car? Because you're already coming with a 3.92 gear. So here's what I would do. Long tube headers, absolutely. High flow metal substrate catalytic converters to keep it green. Ported manifold, larger throttle body, tune it, clutch, that clutch valve thing, the clutch restrictor valve, get that thing out of there. Now, I don't necessarily want to go full stop with that, but that would be kind of full stop stage 1. Stage 2, which would be like stage 2 and then they're in a stage 3, would be everything else as stated, but along with that a camshaft. And I would go with something that would give the car some theater, give it a little bit extra power as well. That would be a whole lot of fun. And of course, you got to have your Barton shifter. So that would be my recipe for that particular car. Because again, you've already got as much gear as you can get in the back of that thing as it sits. Throw some drag radials on it, get out there and give everybody hell. Diff brace, I would probably put that on there too. Let's see. Chris is saying dyno at 835 to the rear on 93. That is going to be on a dyno jet, which is pretty common-ish for that type of a setup. I think the 285 cars that we've run, Mean Cat would have to back me up on this. I cannot remember the numbers exactly off the top of my head. They weren't in the 8s, they're in the 7s, but those are also cars that are all capable of running 9.8s and 9.7s. So Mustang dyno versus dyno jet. G-Man saying, I get zero traction with my stock tires on a 14 SRT8. Nope. What all season tires do you recommend for tire size 245, 45, 20 that will hook better than the stock Goodyears? The Nitto G2s are pretty good for an all-season-ish tire. I know guys that run those all the time. It just depends on how cold it really gets where you're at. But there aren't any all seasons in that size that are going to really make you. They're not going to get you where you need to be. I'll just put it to you that way. What would probably be better is if you stepped up to a 275/40, which is the stock Hellcat size. You'll get a little bit better footprint. It looks good on the car, but it's the same size. But I would probably go that route. I'd go 275/40 on the back of it. The Firestone, was it the 500s? A lot of guys have mentioned that before. I mean, dude, I hate to really give you any suggestions that are like a all-season type tire because they all have tread wear ratings 300 and up. So 300, 400, 500 will get you into an all season, whereas summer tires may dip as low as 200. Although I would argue that the Nitto Tri-5 R2 really is just a good summer tire, and that's a tread rating of 100. So Sovereign's saying, hey, B. Gary's saying, I highly recommend at least a 275 for sure. I would do the same. Roy, thank you very much. Roy saying, I think I will stay stock with Scat Pack. It's fast enough for me. So Look, guys, there ain't nothing wrong with a stock Scatty, and y'all got to remember, I did used to go sniping after Hellcats with Shalandra, and especially at that point in time, I was just running on a drag radial on the back, and they all had a hell of a time dealing with me on the street. So, in fact, the first car that car ever beat at Mopar Fest was a Hellcat. And that was just a traction issue, driver, traction, experience level, all that. So it really wasn't, it was the car made it to the end of the track first, but it wasn't because it was making more power. It was just traction and experience level. Hilton saying, thanks, Pete. Thank you. Sovereign saying, Scat is perfect just like you like it. That's true. Roy's saying it's a 392. Yes, sir. 392, one of my all-time favorite cars to drive in general. Sovereign saying out with Roy. Sean saying, what up, B? What up, man? Sovereign saying something about that 6.4. Yeah, look, it's still to this day one of the more fun cars to drive. And, it on the street, this is the thing about the 6.4 that a lot of guys have a hard time wrapping their head around. It's been proven over and over again that a Scatty on a drag pack, or at least on drag radials, even more so on a drag pack, but on drag radials, will give anything that's stock, within reason, of course. Come on. But it will give a lot of cars fits on the street. And it's because it is so torquey. It is so snappy. It's not meant to be a roll racer. We've proven that over and over again that, the Scat Pack is nasty to about 100 miles an hour. And really, if you're just playing around on the street, it's real hard to beat a Scat Pack. And again, last year we had proven that, a stock Scat with just a little bit of weight reduction on a drag pack would go 1150s. Now think about that for a minute. That's 1150s out of a car with practically nothing done to it other than a little bit of race prep. And we're talking a grand total of like 15 minutes worth of actual invested time, aside from swapping out wheels and tires. That's pretty good bang for the buck. Again, 1150s is rare air, even for some Hellcats, depending on the altitude that you're living at. On a stock tire, for sure, absolutely. I wouldn't even take a Hellcat down the track on a stock tire. That would be a bad idea. But I did with mine. Let's just say that was an interesting experience. Sean is in. Say, what up, B? What's up, man? Sovereign saying something about that 6.4. Yep. Roy's saying there's no Hellcats around here, only Scats. Man, I tell you what. So, it's funny. A lot of guys were looking at the Hellcat, and this goes back back in 2015. A lot of guys were looking at the Hellcat, and they were, I'm not going to say they were scared of them, but there was a certain vulgarity that came with the Hellcat in general. 700 horsepower. Are you kidding me? Even with a 262 gear, they're a handful. At altitude, mind you. And it's something that a lot of guys could relate with the naturally aspirated configurations, but had really no time for the supercharged stuff. And to be honest, I was kind of in that same boat. I wasn't, I'd come from a lot of high horsepower stuff, but I was looking at this more as a street only car. And it's like, if you don't ever plan on taking the thing to the drag strip, or if you're going to go to the drag strip, it's going to be once in a blue moon. A Scatty's really tough to beat because, again, on a sticky tire on the street, it will run just about what it runs in the quarter mile on the street. So you can get out there and have fun, run a couple of numbers, and then call it a day. And you can do that on the street without causing too much of a ruckus. The Hellcat, on the other hand, and by the way, if this starts to sound a whole lot like Hemi versus 440, there's been some folks that have tried to like merge the two ideas together. It's not quite the same because the price difference is so much bigger. But what really twists this up is the fact that the guys that had bought Hellcats that remembered what 700 horsepower felt like back in 2000, okay, back in 2005. These are guys that now had the means to buy a 700 horsepower car, but they had already built 700 horsepower cars in the past. And so you get behind the wheel of your 2007 GT500 that's been pulleyed and tuned and has, had the works done to it. It's making, 620 to the rear wheels, 580 to the rear wheels, whatever the number is. You remember what that car felt like to drive, or even, let's say you still have it. Well, you drive the Hellcat and it didn't feel as fast. And it didn't feel as fast because of the way that the car is geared. It's got 262 gears in the back of it. The Scatties all have 309s. They really need a 330. But again, it's beside the point. The reality is that, yeah, the Hellcat was faster, but in certain circumstances, it didn't feel as fast. And at low RPM, buzzing around town, just kind of goofing off on the street at cruise speeds, Scatty is sharp, man. It is on point, wicked quick to accelerate and respond. Whereas the Hellcat just didn't do that. A lot of times with a 262 gear, the Hellcat would be kind of confused as to what gear to go into, seemingly. Like it was always wanting to downshift, but it was always also wanting to light the tires up, or it was just sluggish under partial throttle, or more to the point, at boost levels that would be, say, less than 3 psi, 4 psi. Car's just sluggish, and it would make sense. 392 is a larger engine, check. 392 has significantly higher compression ratio, check. We're talking basically 11 to 1 versus 9.5 to 1. 392 powered cars more aggressively geared in the back, check. About the only thing that starts playing into the Hellcat's favor is the minute that manifold pressure really starts to crest that 4, 5, 6 psi boost. That's when things got really interesting. But it took boost just to equal the power level of the 392. And it took not an insignificant amount of boost. We're talking 3, 4-ish pounds of boost before it really started to make that steam. So when you look at it again from that perspective, when you're playing around with a thing on the street, the 392 is super snappy, super responsive. That's when it gets to be a lot of fun. Well, until you roll up on a Hellcat, and even though the Hellcat may not feel as fast, it's maintaining that G load for significantly longer. So even if it's the same G load, the second that 392 shifts, the Hellcat stays in the gear for even longer, and the race starts to look like this. I know this because I've done it a multitude of times. So yeah, Scatties are more fun on the street, especially at cruise speeds. They sound amazing, and they will absolutely destroy a set of tires in a night. So there are times where I miss mine, but with everything I've done to Chandelier, aka Revlon, with the 309 gear and the tuning and the trans tuning and everything else, she's every bit as snappy. In fact, it's a little bit more violent than a 392 all the time. So here's the other thing, though. You got to remember, especially if you're looking at Scat versus Hellcat. One of the problems with the Scat versus Hellcat thing is the Hellcat is a weird car because, especially if you're coming from a Scat Pack, because that same G load that you're used to in the Scat Pack when you're wide open throttle, you have that same G load, maybe a little bit higher with the Hellcat, but it carries it for so much longer. Well, the other weird thing about the Hellcat is that you will find yourself cruising at 90 miles an hour all the time. Especially if the car is stock, it just kind of burbles along at that speed. And the funniest thing about the Hellcat versus the Scat Pack is that the Hellcat on the highway, if it's got the stock gear in it, will get better fuel economy than the 392 will. I'd knock down 25, like not even trying with mine. So not quite the same with the 309, but you get the idea. Chuck saying hello. Roy saying, I need wider tires. That's ill. Yeah, I would agree with that. Someone's asking, do you think Scatties are way more expensive for auto insurance? I don't believe that they are, versus a 5.7 or the 3.6. The 3.6 is probably the cheapest. I don't know if the 5.7 would be much less expensive than the Scat Pack. If it is less expensive, that number is going to be, it's not going to be by very much. They're both still V8s, so I don't see how one would be far and away different than the other. Michael saying he traded his Scat for a Kitty. Wish he could have kept his Scat. Yeah, there's been times, man, I've said this over and over again, man. I wouldn't mind having another Scat Pack in the garage. It's so much fun to drive, man. I cannot put it into words how just fun they are. They're excited. They're always seem to be always in a good mood. Scat Packs. Oh, Dad's is saying auto insurance has so many variables for sure. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting to. But for me, no real world difference. Hellcat over double though. Really weird. All depends though. Insurance companies, all different the way they rate things. Yeah, mine's not that bad, but it's also it's not a primary drive or anything like that. Let's see. Roy's saying that his wife's RT is only about $100 less. Yeah, that sounds about right. They're not going to be that far removed from each other. Chuck saying, waiting for a super stock. Spoke to my dealer today. He gave me a much better payment if I wait just a bit longer to trade in my RT shaker. No negative equity. Very nice. Dad's is saying, I can't get close to 25 downhill with a tailwind for sure. I know, I get it. Oh, Summer's saying, I like the idea of that raw NA power. That's what's great about the Scats. Yeah, no, listen, that's, I'll put it to you like this. Scatty with a cam, ported intake throttle body, long tubes is really hard to beat from just a fun, hot rod point of view, a true old school feel of a muscle car. That's what you can expect out of those things. And I mean, guys, look, truth be told, there's a lot of guys that I know of. I say a lot, like it's a stadium full or something. I don't want to oversell this, but I do know people that have had Scat Packs, got a Hellcat, had the Hellcat for no more than 2 years, traded the Hellcat in on a brand new Scat Pack. And when I've talked to these guys, about 3 that come to mind initially, which is a lot when you think about it. But when I've had the conversation with them, the argument against the Hellcat, and this is kind of a universal argument, but Scat Pack, tons of fun on the street, real snappy, boils the tires. I mean, it's everything that the Hellcat can give you in terms of theater, the sound, lighten up the tires, the feel. It's not like the car is different. They have a lighter feel to them than the Hellcat, which is mentionable in this. The guys that I talk to, this is the big, like, if anything, if there's any connection with all these guys. The Hellcat is great, fast, all that, got the panache having the cat on the fenders, but it doesn't really feel as exciting as 700 horsepower should. And because of the way the car is geared from the factory with a 262 gear, it's not interesting. Like if you're out playing in the car and you map the throttle and it goes, bah, 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 bah. Okay, that amount of time to go through the gears in a Scat Pack gets you to 100 miles an hour. The amount of time going through the gears with a Hellcat, instead of 100, you're doing 115. 120, right? Because you're just running with more power with a less aggressive gear, which carries the power that much farther out. Basically, it works out like this. By the time you start to have fun or you're done having fun, the velocity is so great. The weird thing about Hellcats is just, it's not how fast they are. Yeah, it's a 10-second car from the factory. I get that on a drag radial, but it's how they pick up power on the back half of 120 with that 262 gear. It's just easy to get the thing to 120, 130 miles an hour. And that's sketchy for a lot of guys, you know, and it should be, you know, you're really screaming when you're going those kinds of speeds, especially on roads that have cross traffic or deers or whatever the case. So you can kind of see where guys are like, man, it was fun in theory, but in practice, it just doesn't play out. You know, the neat factor, the fun factor, the buddy factor for a lot of these guys goes away. Now, there's another side to this argument. For the guys that got over that fairly quickly, it was immediately, I've got to put a gear in it. I've got to put pulleys on it. It's got to be faster. And then it's got to be faster again. And then what ends up happening is guys get into this downward spiral where it's modification after modification after modification, more power, more power, more power. And the problem with a Hellcat is that a lot more power is just a little bit of effort away. It's a pulley and a tune, injectors, maybe a fuel pump. But for that investment, you pick up a couple of hundred horsepower, especially if you switch fuels. With a Scat Pack, what you got is what you got. I mean, yeah, you can go with a different camshaft. Of course you can. Headers and run it on the 85, bigger injectors, the whole bit. Yes, you can absolutely do that. However, you don't have to. And nobody's expecting you to go out and break any records with the thing. That being said, yes, you can make a 392 run 10s without a whole lot of thought. I mean, it's basically cam, long tubes, tune, a little bit of weight reduction, rear diff brace, a drag pack, really good air, and just a really well prepped track. Yeah, you could get high 1080s out of them. But that's the entry level for the Hellcat. Like, that's what your basic Hellcat will run, especially if you put it on a drag pack. You're into like 1070s at that point. So guys start looking at numbers and they start number chasing and they conflate numbers with, or they mistake, I should say, numbers with fun. Like if it runs 1080s, it's got to be more fun than a car that runs 1180s. No, that's absolutely not correct. And in some cases, it's the other way around. In fact, in most cases, it seems to be the other way around. So just for the guys that are, like dads who was talking about, or asking, I should say, about, well, Hellcat versus Scat on the street, track, everything else. It quits being fun when there's not a lot to be able to compare to. In other words, you've got this Hellcat with a 262 gear, no tune, everything else. If you hammer that thing on the highway, it's not going to feel all that different. I mean, it feels different, don't get me wrong, but to a casual observer, to a passenger, the theater is all there with the Scat Pack. It just maybe has a little bit less G-force to it. It's not necessarily taking away from the experience of the passenger. If that makes any sense. Chuck saying, I've driven a lot of fast cars, but I am sure the super stock will be a bit different than my RT Shaker 6-speed. Oh, yeah, and then some. I know Scat will be closer in character to my RT. Sure it will, but that super stock is a completely different animal. Ken saying, the charming thing about Hellcats is that they are close to or sometimes beat trailer cars, and they don't need a cage. Well, yeah, I've hurt a lot of feelings with my car. I mean, a lot of feelings with mine. Michael's saying, Scat, you can have fun on the street, but the Hellcat, you have to go to a track. More money and you are going to mod it. That is true. I spent over $8 grand modding the Hellcat. Still not fun. 2 hours to drive to. Yeah. And that's the thing, a lot of guys, and again, it's like I was saying before, it's so easy to drag power out of one of these things. But more power is just more problems, though. More power means less traction. More power means, well, now tires become overwhelmingly important, and your setup becomes more important, and everything becomes more of a business. The faster you go, the more of a business that you're in. And when I say business, I mean it not only seemingly figuratively, but literally, because money will be changing hands much more frequently because of tires, upkeep, modifications that just never seem to end. You will end up wishing that you'd have kept your Scat Pack. For some guys, not everybody, but some guys, and again, this is answering the question of why Scat over Hellcat. Some guys end up regretting the Hellcat for the exact same reason that, Michael was talking about, where you can't have fun with the car anymore on the street, even with drag radials. A perfect example, let me give you a perfect example of this. And some of you guys know the story, some of y'all don't. If you don't know the story, another story time for you. If you do know the story, just bear with me. So back when Racer X, we were finishing up Excessive, and I actually delivered Racer X's car to him in Dallas. I drove the car from Houston to Dallas for him. And along the way, and his car was on E85, and along the way, so backstory. I've got a thing for fuel economy. And in this case, I was trying to get the absolute best fuel economy I could out of his car on E85. And at this stage of the game, the car with a 309 gear at 74 miles an hour was knocking down like 19.2 miles per gallon. I get a call from him. He goes, hey, how's the car running? I go, man, it's great. It's getting 19.2 miles per gallon. He goes, how stable is it at wide open throttle from a roll? I said, I don't know. I'm not going to find out. He goes, well, find out. And I was like, okay. So anyway, this is how far you can take one of these things and have it still not nearly as far as you can take it and have it still be scary enough to really get your attention. That car at 65 miles an hour at wide open throttle would light the tires up. Like it would flash the tach. So it's okay, bring it up to 75, hit watt, start to, wraps the tach over again. Okay, we're going to watt this thing at 80. At 80, hammer it. Hazes the tires, burns the tires for as long as I want to keep my foot in the throttle through 130 miles an hour. The car ran great, very stable. Data looked great. Completely wrecked my fuel economy game that I was playing. That was the video game that I was playing, was, get the thing to get the best fuel economy. The moral of this story is that car was extremely fast. 1,000 horsepower Bravo package. It still wasn't nearly as far as you can actually take one. That's boost only, no nitrous, stock cam, the whole bit. Just pulleys, corn, tune, chiller, send it. For every one of those cars that has been put together in that range, in other words, you have to run E85. Not just a single pulley, small pulley Hellcat. Every single one of those cars that I know of, except for, that have been to that level or above, except for, let's say 4, and I know a lot of them, have all gotten rid of their cars. So if power is fun, why is it that they don't hold on to them for more than 12 to 16 months after they do all this work to them? Well, they find that it's just simply not any fun anymore. Fast is not fun. The problems, it's like more power, more problems. And what you end up with is a situation where you've got a car that is, with a car that's simply unstreetable. It's not even fun you can't play with it. And it's certainly not any fun when you're going faster than highway speeds, apply wide open throttle for insert necessity here, and it starts lighting up the tires. That's not necessarily fun. It's exciting for about the first 5 or 6 times that you do it, but then it's annoying. And again, it quits being fun at that point. And when they're violent like that, keep in mind, Hellcats, any positive displacement supercharger combination is going to be violent like that. It doesn't gradually feed power on the way that a turbo would. It's just light switch, it's on. Those types of combinations are the type of combination that reminds people that they're not quite as good as they think that they are. Whereas the Scat Pack rewards you for just doing silly, dumb things. That Hellcat, especially if it's built, will penalize you for doing silly, dumb things. It's not a buddy the way that the Scat Pack is. So, it's not just the car, it's everything that comes with it. Now, all that being said, I wouldn't trade my Hellcat for a Scat Pack, but I've also put in the work to make it as Scat Packy, is that even a word? I've done the work to make it as Scat Packy as I could possibly make it. So there's that. Oh, Sean's saying his Scatty runs 1180s on a tire. That's right. The heavy end saying more power, more tickets. Exactly. They throw you under the jail for some of the stuff that some people do with these cars. Sovereign saying he likes the practicality of the 485. It's where we live in a world where 485 it's 485. That's like, what? It's an 11-second car, and I don't mean like 11.9s. These things will go 11.8s with, just a tire, and will go deep into the 11s with a little bit of prep. So, yeah. Ken saying, time to use the black key. Summer saying, imagine an all-wheel drive Scat. Yeah, no kidding. So I was saying 500 horse mode. That's one thing I do a lot with mine is I will run it in 500 horse mode. And I mean, I enjoy it in 500 horse mode. That's, in fact, when I want to take a trip back in time, the cool thing about, it's a good point, by the way, the cool thing about the Hellcat is just, boop, 500 horse mode. I'm going to say Scat Pack trademark. I like it. Roy saying, I'm going to keep my Scat Pack, even though I can trade it in for $2,000 more than I bought it for. Going to get a Mach 1 if I can get a deal. I hear it's a great car. There's a guy that has one that, eerily enough, has been bringing it to the drag strip when the drag strip was open. Would bring it to the drag strip pretty often, and that car, never actually seen it run. It's always been like on another part of the staging lanes than me, but it is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, that car is really pretty. So yeah, if I were to be in the Mustang market, that Mach 1 would probably be the one that I would go with. So I'm saying I drive a 267 horse ES350. To me, 485 is a huge upgrade. For sure it is. And guys, Roy saying Scat Packy. I know, how do you describe it? Anyway, with that, guys, I got to wrap it up. We're coming up on 2 hours. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for hanging out with me. Thank you guys for contributing as well. Really do appreciate it. Keeps me making these and doing these live videos. But with that, I do got to wrap it up. So thank y'all very much. Love each and every one of y'all. Would not do this without you. If you're going to send it, don't bend it. Keep her shiny side up. Ray, miss and love you, brother. And with that, we are going to call it a night. Y'all take it easy. That is a wrap. Adios.